I think Marvel might be in some trouble. Above and beyond the crappy movies they've been putting out lately, I mean. Now, it's kind of looked like that ever since Discovery bought Warner Brothers from AT&T. David Zaslav, if you haven't heard that name before, you probably will quite often in the future, is the no-nonsense CEO of Discovery. And when he went in and bought WB, he came in with an axe. And since the acquisition, many a head has fallen to that axe, the most public of which was Batgirl a few weeks ago. Now, since then, many more have fallen. And it may be that the Dark Knight himself has now become a casualty. Going back, I think it was August, there was a rumor floating around that the Matt Reeves version of the Batman, starring Robert Pattinson, did not make nearly enough money to make the guys who count the beans very happy. They were expecting a $1 billion movie and came up $250 million short. Now, to us normal plebes, that does not sound like much. But to a movie studio, when they shell out a ton of money to make movies like The Batman, they expect $1.5 tons back, and they did not get it. So they reluctantly greenlit the sequel to The Batman. And in August, the rumor started floating around that Robert Pattinson's version of Batman was not long for this world. They hadn't canceled anything yet, and Matt Reeves was still working on the sequel, but it was looking pretty grim for that version of Batman. And it only made sense because right now, DC has 3 different universes going on at the same time in film. They have Matt Reeves' Batman. They have the Joker's Joker. Those two don't live in the same universe. And then they have the DCEU, which has been a total mess since Walter Hamada and the people around him decided that there was too much man in Batman and too much man in Superman. And so they were going to get rid of the very popular and very well cast Henry Cavill to replace him with a race-changed Supergirl. And they were going to replace Ben Affleck, who was tired of being Batman, with a race-changed Batgirl. And they were going to keep Wonder Woman, of course. Now, I mentioned already that they axed Batgirl. One of the first things David Zaslav did when he got to the books of DC and saw the accounts, he looked at that nearly $100 million mess and was like, hey, we can write that off for tens of millions in tax money. It's gone. It's never seen the light of day. Delete it from the servers. And from what I understand, the Supergirl's gone too. She may appear in this mess of a movie that Ezra Miller has coming out, The Flash, but from what I understand, she's not popular with Zaslav and the people he's got running things. That was August. And ever since then, dribs and drabs, David Zaslav has been axing this or that DC product. The Zatanna film that was supposed to go straight to HBO Max was the latest. That was last week. And I don't understand this idea of the streaming services, especially the ones that have traditional access to the box office, spending tens of millions of dollars to make movies that are not going to bring in tens of millions of dollars worth of subscriptions to the streaming services. If you're going to make a movie that costs that much money, you should release it to the box office. That's where the money's at. That's where you get the box office returns. That's where you get the merchandising, marketing. And you don't get that with streaming services. The only people that know and appreciate what is on streaming services are the people who actually subscribe to streaming services. However, the general public all around the world can appreciate what's at the box office. And so the idea that they were going to make straight to streaming movies for $100 million is insane. I have no idea what Walter Hamada and company were using for brains. I really don't. It's like Hollywood's become a money laundering operation. They spend hundreds of millions of dollars on these things, and you go and see them and you wonder where the money went. Kind of like Rings of Power. And I know I bring a lot of things back around to the Rings of Power, but it's probably the prime example, no pun intended, of what's going on in Hollywood as far as production budgets go. So, fast forward to, I think it was last week or the week before, and coincidentally, Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, and James Gunn all happened to be at Warner Brothers at the same time, most likely signing new contracts. And lo and behold, we have multiple announcements come out. We have Henry Cavill showing up in Black Adam that released last week. We have the announcement that Ben Affleck is going to be in The Flash and Aquaman in a much more significant role than anybody thought, as well as signing a new 3-picture deal. And James Gunn is now the new head of DC Studios, along with Peter Safran. Now, coincidence that suddenly the rumors going about that the Batman Part 2 is going to be pushed back to 2025? In Hollywood, when you push a movie back that far, it's pretty much a sign that that movie is dead. And I don't see David Zaslav willing to shell out for 3 different universes that all come from the same source material. And quite frankly, from what I'm hearing of what they're planning on doing with the Joker 2, I don't think they understand their audience for that movie at all. Because that thing is supposed to be a musical with Lady Gaga. I don't know about you, but the guys I knew growing up who collected comic books were not exactly the musical Lady Gaga sort of guys. And yes, I know ladies read comic books and go to comic book movies too nowadays, but the demographics are not what Hollywood want. The real demographics skew heavily male. And yet they're planning on doing a comic book musical. And so I'm not surprised that we have David Zaslav and company pushing the Batman 2 back to 2025. You have rumors of all kinds of other cancellations right now. The Penguin series that was going to be made for HBO Max is now in doubt. It'll probably depend on how far into production they are or pre-production they are. And to cap it all off, you have a guy like James Gunn taking over the creative side of DC Studios, and a longtime Hollywood producer who understands the business side in Peter Safran taking over the business side of the entire studio. And the singular movie that DC has produced in the last few years that I absolutely loved and was rolling laughing at and enjoying to the hilt with no reservations, no questions as to why they did this or that, was The Suicide Squad. It totally redeemed the concept of the Suicide Squad and was so good they spun off The Peacemaker into a series on HBO Max, led by James Gunn. So, Marvel, what you got? You have Black Panther, Wakanda Forever, with a Mexican submariner who inexplicably has all kinds of metal in his face. Did you guys even read the comic book before you made this movie? You have an Ant-Man movie that nobody really asked for. I mean, the first one and the second one were fine, but they were nowhere near the best of the best as far as stages 1 through 3 were concerned. Not to mention the fact that the trailers for it make it look like it might be another bait and switch. What else do we have? Well, speaking of James Gunn, we have Guardians of the Galaxy 3, and I believe they still have a Christmas special coming out. But his new contract with DC is exclusive, which means he's probably not going to do any publicity for that. So he will not be on the red carpet for Guardians of the Galaxy 3, most likely. Then what do we have? We have Captain Marvel 2. Oh, I'm sorry. It's not Captain Marvel 2 anymore. Why? Because Captain Marvel was cast probably the most incompetently of anything Marvel has ever done. Brie Larson is just plain unlikable. She's not even that likable in other movies that I've seen her in. So we have The Marvels coming out next summer. Summer after that, what do we have? We have Captain Falcon coming out. I'm not sure how popular that one's going to be. I don't see anybody clamoring for a Falcon solo movie before now. And then we have Thunderbolts, I think. A property nobody knows about unless they collect comic books. Because it's basically a bunch of recycled villains who have been turned into anti-heroes. Who knows what they're going to do with that one. But basically, it's a bunch of people who have been either villains or not heroes in other movies who are going to star in that one. And then I think Phase 5 gets wrapped up by Blade, and we're not even sure that's going to make its release date because, as a previous video I did announced, the director decamped. So, as of right now, that is directorless and directionless because apparently the script sucked as well. Because Mahershala Ali was extremely irritated with how PG the script was. And that's what Marvel has coming out for the next 2 years. And I'm not counting the ridiculousness they have going on over on Disney Plus. Because the junk that they have going on right now over there completely sucks. And the only thing anybody is really interested in, and the only thing anybody asked for, was Daredevil. And if what they did to him in She-Hulk is anything to go by, they are not bringing back the Daredevil from Netflix. They are going to Disney Channel the hell out of him. making him practically unwatchable. Unless the people they have in charge of that production are not people involved with the other crap they have going on. And given that Kevin Feige is still the head of the studio, and he seems to have forgotten how to make comic book movies all of a sudden, this is not looking good. So Marvel, I think DC's put you on notice. They are done screwing around, and they have the more recognizable characters. You've had a decade and change of ruling the box office and ruling the toy stores. Of course, neither one of you can make comic books right anymore because Japan's kicking your butt. There's a reason Netflix is optioning all of those manga properties for live-action productions, even though they can't do those right. I'm sensing a theme here. But I find it very interesting that Ben Affleck, Henry Cavill, and James Gunn were all in a room, and if not in a room, at least in the same building, at around the same time. And the one thing DC movie fans have been asking for is for DC to get its head out of its rear, find somebody who can put Batman, Superman, and Wonder Woman on the screen at the same time in a manner that make them recognizable with competent writing and competent directing and competent CGI and competent cinematography. And we have James Gunn, who managed to take a property DC completely screwed up with the Suicide Squad. Or Suicide Squad, or whichever one came first. The second one that James Gunn did, while it was made around the pandemic and therefore it was not well received by the box office and had to go to streaming to make any kind of money back for the studio, it was clearly the more superior movie. It was friggin' hilarious. It was well written. It was well acted. It was well directed. And if there was anything on the DC slate over the last decade that I would want to see more of, it would be that. And the guy responsible for that is now running the whole thing. We will see. But I think Marvel's in trouble. I think Marvel's in a lot of trouble. And most of it is of their own making. Because Black Adam, apparently, I haven't watched it and I don't plan to until it hits cable. But Black Adam is apparently an okay movie. Kind of like the dumb action movies you used to see that were produced in the late 90s, early 2000s. That made a bit of money here and there. And everybody could go watch them. And everybody could come away having said, yeah, that was entertaining for a couple of hours. It's not reinventing the wheel, people. It's entertainment. It's not a political science course. It's not a speech by a politician or an activist masquerading as an actor. It's just entertainment. And the fact that it took The Rock and all of his celebrity and power in Hollywood to pound it into the heads of the idiots at the studio that bringing Henry Cavill back as Superman was a smart thing to do tells you the level of intelligence at DC Studios over the last few years. What kind of brainlets fire Henry Cavill as Superman? He's easily the best cast Superman we've ever had. Dude is buffed to hell, is a fan of the comic books, loves the role, and has been begging people to get DC off its butt and make another Superman movie with him. Instead, those geniuses were going to replace him with a Supergirl, no Supergirl fan, is ever going to want to see, because that's not Supergirl. Actually, more accurately, that's not Superman. And they wanted to do the exact same thing to Batman. They wanted to bring in a not Batman in the form of not Batgirl. But we will see what James Gunn does. If anybody can turn that stupid thing around with the support of David Zaslav, it probably is James Gunn. And I'm kind of surprised they did not do this sooner and allowed activist hacks like Walter Hamada to completely sabotage a multi-billion-dollar money-making machine like DC Comics. But then again, anybody who's read DC Comics lately knows that that's real easy to do when you hire idiots like Walter Hamada. And the entire DC part of the company at Warner Brothers is exactly the same. None of them have any idea what the hell they're doing. And that has been shown over the last few years. I'd like to put this video under the title of news, but really, it's just a rant. And I'm not even a DC guy. I'm a Marvel guy. But I'm pretty close to apathy with those idiots. And because I never really cared for DC, I really don't have any ability to get to apathy with them. I'm just interested in what they do, and quite frankly, what they've been doing over the last decade is completely baffling. We will see if James Gunn, with David Zaslav at the helm of Warner Brothers Discovery, can turn that around. Because he is definitely no Walter Hamada. He came up from the hard side of Hollywood doing B movies at Troma. So he knows how to stretch a budget. He knows how to do filmmaking right. If he can bring that to the creative side of DC, while Peter Safran does the business side, we might actually start seeing good stuff from DC. And that's about all I have for this video. If you like what I do here, please hit the like button, subscribe to the channel, share the video, and comment down below to help out with the YouTube algorithm. I haven't gotten to episode 2 of The Peripheral yet. That should be tomorrow or the day after, which probably pushes back my post-mortem on both The Rings of Power and House of the Dragon a little bit, but not much. I still plan to do both of those, and they both should be within the next week or so. See you in the next video. Tschüss.